Hello again, everyone. I'm Father Joe Nazzle from Signano Mission House in Berkeley. When I was a boy growing up in the 60s in St. Louis, I used to collect baseball cards. And when I'd open the package and start chewing the gum that came with the cards, I'd be especially excited if one of my hometown heroes from the St. Louis Cardinals was in the package. Someone like Lou Brock or Bob Gibson, who both of whom died recently, who were part of the Cardinal teams in the 60s that won 3 National League pennants and 2 World Series. Now I don't collect baseball cards, I collect holy cards, pictures of saints I've met along the way. People like Saint Elizabeth, who died in February of this year, who had a passion for the outcast and especially for those in prison, who helped shape my own understanding of precious blood spirituality. Or Saint Stella, who built the Center of Hope in Wichita for those in the fringes of poverty and of life. Or Saint Anastasia, patron saint of hospitality. Or Saint Mary Catherine, the patron saint of education, who integrated schools long before society did. Who are these wearing white robes? Where did they come from? The book of Revelation asks this on this feast of all saints. They are Saint Teresa Zuber, patron saint of those who sew, and Saints Helen Chang and Margaret Chow from China, who came over to the United States as young women to serve with the adorers of the blood of Christ. They are Saints Aunt Louise and Uncle Red from St. Peter's and later Ellsbury, patron saint of farmers, and Saint Aunt Melba of O'Fallon. They are Saint Sophia and Saint Anna, my grandmothers, who nurtured faith and vocation in me. They are Saint Edwin, my older brother, patron saint of those who suffer from mental illness and die by suicide, and Saint Mary Ann, my little sister, whose friendship with so many people was seen in the long lines of those who came to mourn her death 10 years ago. They are Saint Lorraine, hurricane of hope and helpfulness, patron saint of those women who make their voices heard above the clamor of clericalism, and Saint Mary V., patron saint of those who stand with those living and dying of AIDS. So many saints I've known, so many I barely scratched the surface of the great multitude. There's just too many to count. What do they all have in common? They knew who they were as children of God. Because as John reminds us in the second reading, we are God's children now. What we shall later be has not yet been revealed. Saints live from the belief that they are God's beloved, that they are God's children. Are they perfect? Far from it. Would they call themselves saints when they were alive? Not a chance. But they knew who they were as God's beloved children, and they sought to live that truth by practicing the Beatitudes that are outlined in the gospel for this feast. You know, when we look through that photo album of our faith, family, and community life, we see so many snapshots of sanctity. Look closely at these holy pictures of priestly people. You'll see how they all dressed in the garment of grace. Their habit is holiness. Trace the threads in these habits of holiness, and you'll see woven in the fabric of their lives the qualities outlined in Matthew's gospel and what we've come to know as the Beatitudes. These are the threads: a hunger for justice, a fidelity to the gospel, a hope that endures, that gives their lives meaning. And they call us to make holiness our habit as well. These threads of holiness are woven into the garment of grace that we receive at baptism, when we're first called to be saints. Each of us is part of this communion of saints. We're children of God now, not because of any merits we've earned or the mercy even that we've shown to others, but because of the love of God and the mercy of God that has been bestowed on us. It is this love that shines through our human weakness, those flaws and faults and failures we often see in ourselves and each other that often prevent us from seeing the sanctity to which we're called. It is this love that beckons us to believe in our own goodness and in the goodness of others. It is a love that invites us to make holiness our habit. You know, there's nothing plastic or pedestrian about the witness of saints. They reject the pedestal that places them above the rest and prefer to take the lowest place where they serve the rest. Saints in the Christian tradition are those who take the life of Jesus seriously. They seek to live that life in their daily life. They're about the work of God's realm, feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and visiting the sick and challenging the oppressors and making peace by pursuing justice and confronting unjust systems, comforting the afflicted while they afflict the comfortable. The Christian saint, Sister Joan Chittister said, is the one who put on the mind of Christ and so put on the broken heart of the world. Such are the people whose sanctity challenges us to live our lives. Do we want to be saints? Do we have the desire deep within us to be saints? Or do we simply raise our hands and say, no, I can never be a saint? Sanctity is for someone else, someone who's famous, certainly someone who's dead. Because after one has died, their sins are forgotten and only the good that person has done is remembered. And yet the surprising aspect of this Feast of All Saints is that it's not just for those who have died, those holy women and men who've gone before us in faith. It's also about us. The truth is that God is the one who makes us worthy to be saints by calling us children of God. This is who we are. This is our identity. This is our feast day. This is the festival that celebrates those who've gone before us and who've inspired us to be poor in spirit, people who place others before ourselves, people who mourn with those who mourn, even as we touch the tender spot in our own wounded soul. This is the still point, the ignition switch, if you will, of our own compassion. Saints are people who motivate us to seek justice and peace for those who are oppressed and alienated. You know, Sister Wendy Beckett, in her Book of Saints, wrote, holiness can be easily appear as something remote from us, to be read about or gazed at from afar. Yet to be a saint, she said, is wholly practical and realistic. It's the holy and practical, realistic growth into our own truth. It's the deepest fulfillment, she said, of our own personal realization of what we've been potentially from birth. So what's our truth? What is the truth that shapes our lives? Do we really believe we're meant to become saints? We hold up a hand and object, pardon my grammar, I ain't no saint. And those who know me would hardly agree. But the grace of God continues to work to make us better. Most of us conceal our identities as God's beloved very well. But this feast challenges us to live in such a way that the Beatitudes hold within them the power to change the world, to transform the world. This day, the Sunday before Election Day on Tuesday, is a good time to remember those who have transformed the world by the lives they have lived, by their attitudes of being, by living the Beatitudes. Don't forget to vote on Tuesday. And spend some time this weekend looking back through that faith album, those snapshots of sanctity, of those people in your own lives who have helped change and transform the world. Through God's grace, we're all called to be saints. May we continue to meet in prayer and linger there a while. God bless you. Have a safe week and take good care.